We're back.
Hey everybody, so sorry about the delay there. Had some technical difficulties. We appreciate your patience and sticking with us there for a few minutes. We're super glad that everybody's here today. Thanks for joining us. For those of you that have been in quarantine and aren't quite sure what day it is and what's going on, today is Thursday, May the 7th. So thank you so much for being here with us. We got some great content for you today. We're going to be talking about how can we create effective financial strategies for your business as we go through these uncertain times and everything, trying to figure out what's going on with the economy and coronavirus and lots of question marks around everything. So we're excited to share this content with you today. Really proud for this event to have partnered with SCORE, and we're going to be telling you guys a little bit more about that organization here in just a minute. But super great organization. Really happy that they're here participating with that with us. Want to just remind everybody that this is a live event, so we want your questions, we want your interactions. We're going to be monitoring the YouTube chat as we go through this event, so post your questions there. We'll do our best to answer as many of them as we can. If for some reason we don't get to your question or we missed it or we run out of time, this video will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, so come back in after the fact and post in the comments down there. We'll monitor those comments and we'll come back and hopefully give you answers to those questions. While you're down there, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can stay on top of all of the latest information coming out from Amplify on ways that you can help not only survive during this time, but get your business to continue to still grow and thrive. So I'm going to do some introductions now and tell you who we got with us here today. Sitting immediately to my left, we have Matt Stratton from SCORE. Matt, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Josh.
We have the founder and president of Amplify, Brent Allen. And rounding out our panel on the end down there, we have the esteemed, ever-talented, dare I say good-looking, Amplify CFO, Mr. Tommy Morton is with us as well today. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to participate. So, Matt, I mentioned SCORE just a minute ago in our partnership with them. Give us a little download. Tell us who SCORE is, what you guys do.
Okay. So, yeah, SCORE is a nonprofit funded by the SBA, the Small Business Administration, and we are made up 100% of volunteers. Most of the volunteers are retired or current executives, CFOs, CEOs, COOs, and some of us are working like myself, but we all volunteer to provide free mentoring for small businesses, and our goal is to help start and grow businesses. And last year, nationally as an organization, SCORE helped start about 30,000 businesses and create about 100,000 jobs nationally. So we're really proud of that. And so everything we do really is to help grow businesses. Me personally, I think that businesses need three things, especially in this environment. So I've created my professional life to provide those three things, whether it's through my wealth management practice or my volunteer efforts with SCORE. And that is, I think everybody needs some clarity right now, especially with post-COVID-19 world, clarity around cash flows. I think everybody needs a vision for the future. And the third thing, I think everybody really needs a strategic partner to help execute that vision and go alongside and create strategies. And so one of the reasons we're really excited to partner with Amplify is because we think they're uniquely suited to provide those three things: really clarity over cash flow, a vision for the future, and the ability to partner with you to help grow your business.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. I agree 100%. There's a lot of synergy between our organizations. Amplify's mission is to help other organizations grow and succeed. So when we find groups like SCORE that are totally aligned with those goals in there, we love to partner with them. And so we really appreciate you guys participating in this with us. We look forward to a long-term partnership with SCORE. If you want some information about SCORE or Amplify, down in the description of this video, we've got both the websites linked down there. So go on there after this presentation, check those websites out. As always, you can email us at connect@amplifygrowth.com, and we'll be happy to talk to you directly about who we are and put you in touch with SCORE and what we may be able to do for you as well. So some of the technical difficulties we had, guys, we had some slides and some different presentations that we were going to show along with this conversation. Unfortunately, you're going to have to stare at us the whole time because we ran into some technical problems. But we're going to walk through this content and tell you about everything. But in the description, after we get done with this video, there's going to be a link down there where you can go on and download some slides and some information about the things that we're talking about today, so that you can have some more information that's there that you can follow up on. Again, please post your comments and your questions as we go along. We'll do our best to answer as many of those as we can. So let's jump in here. Let's get to start talking about some content. We got a lot of stuff to cover today. We're going to do our best to stay on. Executive, as a business owner, you guys are used to creating strategies and forecasting and creating plans for your business. And usually on a normal basis, when you do that, you've got some foundation you can work from. You've got good historical data. You've got some trends you can see in the market, and you know where things are going. You can make some reasonable assessments and assumptions about some things. But, as we look out to the future for now, especially over the next, toward the end of this year, going into next year, with the economy, where it's going on, with the virus, and so many unknowns, there's a giant question mark around that. And a lot of people are struggling to figure out, should I even put these plans in place? Does it even matter? How do I go about doing that stuff? So just walk us through some of the experience and how do we start to focus and think about those kinds of things, and what's your experience taught you as we go forward?
Sure. It's a great question. I obviously own my own business now. We've been in business about 3 years. Tommy, you have owned at least one business.
One business, yeah. And survived 9/11. So,
yeah. And so we're both CFOs, but we also both have owned small businesses. And what I know, Tommy, is generally, as Josh is alluding to, when conditions are fairly stable, I can plan really ad hoc. I don't have to do a lot of true analysis, just because I can operate through gut and really just be successful in that way and adjust on the fly. In the last month, it has been just, there's been an unbelievable amount of uncertainty. I mean, not from a month to month, but from a day in, day out, hour to hour, things changing. It's been really difficult to handle.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things to understand is the things you've always used to help guide your business and make those decisions that are going to follow. Those have changed. I mean, today you might be looking at your cash account or your checks. You're checking your cash position on a daily basis, or looking at where your revenue is at or your orders, as opposed to you may have checked it on a weekly basis. The things that have always been those trends and those aspects of your business that were tells for you, that game has changed. At least for the next 6 months to a year, it's not the same environment that you were operating in.
Yeah, I agree. So one of the things that I experienced the anxiety, like I'm sure all of you guys did, as the economy started shutting down. We started with a medical emergency, and it very quickly turned into an economic event. And it's easy when those things happen to start to freeze up a little bit, get very anxious, to get quiet, to draw yourself in, to basically put your head in the sand and hope, cross your fingers and hope things will get better. And for us, Tommy and I and the team here, what we did was we got together and said, okay, we're scared, but here's the deal. Let's map out the absolute worst case scenario that we can imagine, and now let's put a plan around that. How do we mitigate the risk? And once we got to that foundational point, we were able then to look at the opportunities that were out there for us, not just the obstacles.
Those opportunities are out there, and you have to get comfortable with where you're at, and understand who you are and where you're at, and then you can start looking for your opportunities. I heard somebody just say the other day, this isn't a time to think outside of the box. It's time to get rid of the box. So, this is an opportunity to move forward, but at the same time, you've got to know where you're at, and you can't overreact. This is a day-by-day situation, and you need to be thinking forward, but realize your plans can have to adapt to what new conditions might come down the road.
Absolutely. So we think about it in three different areas that we focused on. and that was robust forecasting. And one thing that we know, Tommy and I always joke about, the one thing we know about a forecast the moment it is created is that it's wrong. None of us have a crystal ball, and so we really advocate running multiple scenarios. It's not as much work as you guys think once you get a baseline, and making sure that we have the range covered, because we know we're not good enough to nail a forecast 100%. And then we're going to talk about communication to your vendors and your customers and your banks. And third, we're going to talk about different programs out there. It can help you close the gap once you have those forecasts and you understand what the gaps might be in cash. How do I protect myself against the downside? So then again, I can get out there and get aggressive.
Yeah, to your point, that those 3 points are really critical, and very top line is that forecasting. But everybody complains about a weatherman and how inaccurate he is. They've never really understood how financial accountants survive, because our forecasts are never right. So, when we're looking at this, that revenue forecast is a key component, and that communication back to the customer, not putting your head in the sand, not saying, I don't want to know the bad news. You need to know where your customer's at, and you need to be communicating with them.
So, Tommy, let's talk a little bit about revenue forecasting. So, if I'm looking at my business, I might say, hey, I'm going to lose a month, and then I'm going to be down 10%. You think that's a good place for me to start?
No, I think we need to be looking even lower. I think, at the end of the day, we're not talking about profits today. We're talking about cash. And when we're talking about cash, we need to know what the worst case scenario is.
Yeah. And so, we advocate for doing something that, you guys are not going to want to do. Everybody here you're really going to struggle to be this pessimistic, but we're going to ask you to take your baseline, and your baseline could either be your previous year, it could be your budget for this year, and then stress test it, do 3 different scenarios, take it to 80%, take it to 60%, and take it to 40%. So, I know a lot of folks are going to think that that's too extreme, but you really cannot overreact in these situations, specifically when we're talking about cash.
Yeah, when you're looking at the cash, because at the end of the day, you've got some fixed expenses that you got to make sure you cover, and you really have to understand the lowest amount of revenue that you can bring in to continue to pay those components of the bills, as well as cover those variable costs. So, you really need to be able to look absolute worst case, and you'll be better off because you're probably going to beat that, but you want to know that that's as low as you can go. And if you get to a point that you think you're there, you probably need to go a little bit deeper.
Yeah. So guys, if I can jump in here for just a second. So what's the benefit then if we're looking at multiple scenarios and we're looking at different things, what do we gain really by doing that and seeing we got these different spreads that you just mentioned and these different scenarios that are out there. Okay, now, what do I gain by that? What do I do with those?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question the right way, but really it's confidence. Your employees need you to be confident. They need you to be aggressive. They need you to be able to keep your eyes up instead of down. And the only way you can do that is to know your backside is covered. And so when we run these scenarios, I'm not advocating for you going and cutting to the bone like you're going to go to 40% right now. I'm advocating for you to have that plan in your back pocket so that if that does start to happen, you pull that plan out, you execute on that plan, you keep moving forward.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point to just put that in there so that we know whatever scenario comes up, we know how we're going to react in those situations. Because if you have that plan in place, then it can allow you and set you up for success. Some of those decisions that you have to make may be tough decisions, may be hard decisions, but at least we know which direction we're going to go and what we're going to do to help save our business and keep us in operation.
I think the other point really to bring in line there is when you're looking at a situation and maybe it goes south more than you were originally thinking, a lot of times you're going to be reactive and knee-jerk. Having a plan in place allows you to have thought through it and be mentally prepared for that situation to help you in that decision making, because that decision making when you're at your worst is probably more important than when you're at your best.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great point, Tommy. And so we encourage all you guys to do that. I know you don't want to do it. You don't want to look at that type of a negative scenario, but it's best practice as far as we're concerned. So once you get that, we are building a forecast all the way down to try to reconcile and look at what our cash position is going to be, no matter what these downside scenarios are. So then we start to look at your expenses. And expenses, Tommy, you want to talk about, we put them in buckets. We talk about people, we talk about materials, we talk about facilities, some operating expenses, and then we talk about our timing, timing pieces, and we'll kind of go through all those. But you talk about the people side. How should folks think about, okay, if my revenue's down that much, how do I forecast what my labor costs could be?
So, really, when I look at the revenue decrease, I look at labor in two ways. Number one, if I might just look at it as a percent of revenue. I'm looking at it as a percent of revenue. I'm going to be looking for it to actually mirror the revenue decline. At a certain point, that's not going to occur. You're going to have a certain amount of revenue, labor in place in order to get the revenue out the door. As you're doing your revenue forecast, if you have the ability, in some cases you might, in some cases you might not, it's helpful if you can actually, if you're a manufacturer, get it down to a SKU level and see how many hours of production you're actually going to need. That might not be possible. So if you can't do that, then you go to that percent of revenue and really look for where you're at. Because you want to make sure the one thing you have to do in this environment is meet delivery dates and get product to other people. And the worst thing you could do is be 30 or 40 days late on delivery.
Yeah, I think I see a lot of folks make the mistake of reducing their labor pro rata with the revenue.
Yeah.
And in my experience, that's not necessarily realistic most of the time. Your labor expenses are not that elastic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would encourage everybody to at least put some type of factor on that, whether it's 50%. If you're somebody with high salary individual versus hourly, I mean, it could be that you have to hold your labor costs steady until a certain stair step where you have a big decrease.
Exactly. So, I think when you're looking at this, you're looking at the experience level. A lot of times you have to go through and make decisions about the people that you would retain and how you would use those people. And on top of that, making sure you have the right skill set. Again, this is an opportunity in this environment to really step back and really look at where you're at and make sure that you have the right processes, the right equipment, the right people.
So Tommy, not talking just about the financial piece of it, another consideration is when we ramp up, is our labor force going to be available and ready? And what are you seeing on that front?
So right now, there are companies, there are a couple clients that have some positions that they're worried about filling. They have employees that have taken a layoff and are on unemployment, and they've said, we'll come back when unemployment runs out. On the other hand, there are other companies that they can't find any workers other than some temporary workers through the restaurants that are in that particular region because they aren't able to work, and we have people that do want to work.
Gotcha. So once we get past people, which is our main concern, obviously, we start thinking about your materials, and obviously different businesses have different types of materials and different levels of the critical nature. But one of the things that we're concerned about is reduction of supply, at least temporarily, and what that could do to your business. So obviously, with reduction of supply, we can end up with time periods where we can't actually get the material.
That's correct.
We could end up with an increase in price, at least inflation,
and a little bit of inflation
in the short term. We could want to look out for freight costs. We get it to us, and get it to us quick. And then the other thing is I've seen some businesses, and this is a real balancing act, is they are actually overbuying inventory because they're afraid of the scarcity. They're afraid they won't be able to get it and what impact that has to cash. So you mind kind of talking through that for a minute?
Let's think about the current situation for Wendy's. Okay. That's a perfect example. One of the best hamburger chains around. You can go there and get chicken. So I mean, when you think about that, and they're responding to that. Okay. And again, I'm going to go back to Wendy's. The fact that they started offering breakfast a while back, they got out of the box. They are helping their actual revenue channels. Well, on the other hand, when I'm thinking of materials, there's a real balancing act between cash and liquidity versus availability. And knowing your lead times and having that communication with the supplier to know what they have available and what you can get your hands on, or maybe you can work out a scenario with them with maybe it's a consignment, or they'll produce it and keep it on hand, but you've got to pull it down in a certain time frame. I know, it's difficult to go ahead and invest in that inventory that I'm going to use in 6 months from now. But if you're looking at a long time lead, an item that has a long lead time, like an alloy, a specialty alloy or something, you need to put yourself in a position where you know where that's at. So you need to be talking to that vendor and really be looking and managing that inventory based upon the orders.
Tommy, are you encouraging clients to build in a buffer for increased cost due to lower supply amounts?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know when we start seeing price increases probably creeping in my guesstimation, I'm just my personal opinion is that the constraint that's going to happen on the supply line is going to be because all the orders that they had pretty nicely stacked in that flowed through their plant, that pivot up demand is going to be like a little bit of a tidal wave coming in, and all of a sudden they're going to, what wasn't a bottleneck is now going to be a big bottleneck, and to get that product through and the costs that might be incurred to get it to the product out into the supply chain, I do believe that there will be some pricing pressure. I think it might probably be short-lived, but I do believe that that's going to be a reality.
So far we're talking about decreasing revenues.
Yeah.
We're talking about potentially decreasing labor, but not to the same rate that we're decreasing revenues. We're talking about materials. We're talking about potentially looking at price increases or inflation, and we're looking at having to actually raise our inventory levels in a period where our revenue is declining. So we're trying to figure out what is the worst case scenario pressure on our cash, just so everybody remembers that we're trying to make sure we really understand that.
Right. Yeah. Because again, it's not about income right now. It is about cash and getting through to the other side. It's going to be a little bit of a volatile point for a little while.
So Tommy, then we talk about facilities, and my experience is the majority of facilities cost is really fixed.
Yes.
And so that's one of those that you would not adjust as you adjust your revenue and as you roll through your expenses, short of you negotiating with like your landlord and getting some very specific relief.
Yeah, you might get some payment deferrals. You might be able to renegotiate the lease. The utilities are going to be the rates they are. Who would have ever thought internet was a utility, right? But now it's so important to the way we're doing business today. We have other aspects of a facility. Your property tax isn't going to change. The only thing when you think of a facility and the costs that are there, it might be some of those for a manufacturer that has a cooling tower and they're using a lot of water. That might change a little bit, but still, it's not going to be considerable. It's not enough that you're going to really see it. So when you're looking at your facility costs, you need to really think of those as fixed costs right now and be a little bit high on your estimate and beat it, and you'll be better off.
So on top of facilities, the other piece is the operating costs, and I think both of those buckets, they're just, our point is they're not going to adjust on their own. No. And so as your revenue ticks down, that's going to have to be somewhere where you put effort into. So as you're forecasting, you don't want, if you're going to reduce those expenses, you got to make sure that you know exactly where that's coming from. So on the operating side, we're talking about your insurance, your transaction fees, safety equipment, technology costs. All those other things, sometimes we call it overhead, those items that aren't being driven necessarily by any type of production or output of your business.
Yeah, there's definitely an opportunity on insurance. If you have a reduction in workforce, if you're in the middle of the year, have them relook your workman's comp. If your revenue's down substantially, have them go back and look at what that premium is for the component of insurance is driven by revenue. When you're looking at your operating costs within the facility itself, things that you would have needed for production to clean things, this is again an opportunity to reevaluate the way you operate. Because you've always done it that way does not mean you need to do it that way going forward. You have an opportunity to step back and look and maybe find a different way or a better way to operate.
So once we have all that, Tommy, I think it's important for us to think about what type of one-time expenses we may have over the next six to 9 months, just to make sure that we are keeping that top of mind. I want to make sure everybody doesn't forget while taxes were pushed out, that they're still coming due. So, all those folks, I think, Tommy, was it June?
July is when for both corporate as well as individual.
So make sure that everybody's cognizant of that deadline, that potential cash outlay. Cybersecurity, beefing up your technology, additional cleaning that you may have to have for your facilities, and then HR and legal type advice. I mean, or where we're headed, the environment is much more complex on the financial, human resource, and legal side than it has been in the past.
Yeah, when we're thinking about cybersecurity, working remote is I think going to be a reality going forward. In today's environment, given we're 6 inches apart, so we're sort of distancing. The reality is, you might not have everybody come in to the office, have all 40 people. You might have 20 come in 2 days a week, and 20 others come in 2 days a week, to have some social distancing over the next 3 to 6 months. We might not fully all be back in the office. So having the security for your business systems to make sure that unwanted attacks, or that you're losing critical information, or worst case, you have an employee that is taking advantage of this. And so there's a lot of things you really got to think through, and there is cost associated to protecting yourself. The other thing is just supplies, PPE supplies, PPE. That is going to be a cost that I think all businesses are going to see go up. For a while there, one of our clients, they're giving masks out every day, new sets. Okay. So these are things that in the past they didn't do. The time for cleaning. When you think of a restaurant, if a restaurant opens at 25% capacity, the number of people that are working in the space that they have to have. So there is going to be additional costs. And when you're thinking of that, cost per utility dollar, okay, it just went up, not making as much revenue.
So Josh, I think we were all hoping that we were going to go into this, we were going to flatten the curve, we would come out of it, and everything's going to go back to normal. I'm hearing a lot of speculation. I think we have to be able to plan for some type of recurrence potentially later this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And, all signs, indicators point that when something like this we're dealing with, we all know that at some point there will be a spike in the virus, that it will return. It's something that's in our world now. It's not going away. We're going to have to learn how to deal with it as we continue to find resources on the medical side to help combat this and as we go forward. But, our businesses have to adapt and move forward. And I think you guys bring up a really great point that, as your organization grows and as your business gets larger, it becomes more complex. There's more moving pieces. There's things to figure out. And there's things that you might be used to handling, complex forecasts and situations and dealing with things. But for smaller businesses and organizations, family-run shops or just small businesses in general, they're used to operating on a fairly simplistic model, but now outside circumstances are forcing them to sort of adopt some of these complex attitudes and looking at things from a complex solution, which I think is a real challenge and something that we've all got to sort of shift to, a new normal and expectations and how we view the world and what's going on and how we forecast.
That's a good point. So Tommy, once we have gotten through, forecasting our revenue, forecasting all of our expenses, kind of looking at them in those different buckets we just talked about, we need to think, we would talk in terms of balance sheet.
Right.
We need to think about how that converts to cash.
Right.
So what are the things, if we talk about the things that can eat our cash up that are not profit related, we're talking about our accounts receivable, our collections, or our customers paying us on time, our disbursements, are we writing checks, are we paying our vendors on time?
Right.
We've got our inventory levels. We just talked about that. Are they going up or down? Are they mirroring the revenue? And then we've got any type of debt payments or distributions that we're used to making. So talk to me about what are best practices around forecasting your collections.
So, when you're looking at collections at this time, in this situation we're in, the first thing I would do is to say I'm not going to collect 30% of my dollars, because everybody else is in the same boat I'm in, and some people are in a worse boat. And those businesses that were already struggling, I don't know if you're going to collect that. You have to come to that reality. But you need to look at your own accounts receivable, or the amount actually due to you from your customers, and look at your customers. I think budgeting to not collect a large sum of that and factoring that into, I mean, I only have 70% of that cash coming in, and I'm still going to need to pay 100% of my vendors. That's an equation that you've got to come to grips with as a worst case scenario. Best case is you're talking to the customer, you are communicating, hey, I will work with you because we're in the same boat. And if I can help you, you're going to help me. And so it has to be a give and take situation. Nobody wants to be in this situation. Some businesses have been more impacted than others. So working with a customer by taking a credit card payment, giving a regular call to them, taking incremental payments, those are ways that you really need to look at. And the scary part of that, though, is the guy that says, hey, I also need to place that order. And I need a $5,000 order, and they owe you $10,000 that's 90 days past due. What do you do?
Yeah, certainly looking at credit approval procedures through this and revisiting those. A lot of folks have very informal credit procedures or credit approval procedures, and it's tough. But there's a lot of times where you're going to have to actually continue to pull back on that revenue just to make sure that you're not producing ththings and not getting paid for it.
Like you and I've always said, it's not a sell until you get the cash, right?
That's right. So, we think about that. I think about, Tommy, even if we are able to get the money in the door, we should probably expect it comes later than normal.
Definitely.
So take your collections, and instead of if you're planning on getting it tomorrow, think about it getting it next month.
Yeah.
And kind of push everything out that way. Now, this is about the time that probably everybody, now that you've decimated your revenue and you've dialed up all your expenses,
Can't get inventory.
now you're not going to collect on your AR. You're getting ready to jump off the bridge. And I just, want to make sure everybody knows, just
Relax.
if you'll continue through the process, we are going to end up with a worst case cash position, and then we're going to talk about what you do with that. So outside of the AR, we will talk about AP. And the worst thing I think folks can do with their payables in treating their vendors, maybe you don't have the cash to pay those vendors right now, but pick up the phone and call them. The worst thing you can do is go silent on them and leave them in a place where they're not able to plan for their cash flow, and you hurt those long-term relationships. So, again, I would encourage you to manage that, to talk to your vendors. There's some vendors that will be able to handle giving you extended terms. There's some vendors that will be really critical that you pay them as close to on time as possible. Tommy, we already talked about inventory levels. We need to think about, are they going to go up or down? One point I would like to make is, coming out of a dip, if our sales do ramp up and we're successful, then we could end up pouring a lot of cash into inventory during that ramp up. So everybody needs to be careful with that. And then the last piece, from a timing perspective, or I should say a non-income statement cash impact, would be your debt payments. I would expect everybody to be, making sure that you're looking at that and, talking to your bank. We're going to talk about communication here in just a second. But talk to your bank and make sure that they're working with you. The bankers that I know and have been talking to are all, they're out there in support of small business, and they're going to do everything they can to help you navigate this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. Being in supply chain in my career, having that open communication, treating your supply chain as part of your team is super critical. But so you bring up communication and talking, and so who do we need to be talking to? What do those communications look like? How do we go about that? Where do we need to focus those conversations on?
Yeah, so obviously it starts with collections. It starts with your customers. And instead of hoping, crossing your fingers, again, putting your head in the sand, I encourage you to pick up the phone and call your customers. And don't call them harassing them. Call them and say, hey, I know we're all in a bad situation. What are you thinking? What are you seeing? What are your plans? Can we talk about, when we can expect the money in? And I would encourage you to do that over the phone and not through email. I think you get more honest and transparent communication when you pick up the phone and do that. And I think you'll get good information, and it'll help you to make sure that you'll have the cash when you need it.
I think in today's world, we should do a Zoom. Let's look them in the eye, right? The same as being there.
Yeah. Close.
As close as you can. At the same time, when you're talking to them about the cash, and understand they're in the same boat as you, The other thing you need to do at that moment is reassure them that you're there for them and say, look, let's talk about what your business plan is. Let me understand what you're thinking, and stay in touch with them, because to your point about all of a sudden I need a lot of inventory because my orders start flowing in, you want to be ready. And so the communication is, hey, what can we do to get me paid? What is your production you're thinking you're looking like? And as you get ready to get better, let me know, because I want to make sure I take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to put that customer at ease. And I'm not a salesperson, so I'm pretty good at telling them they owe me money and let's get it in. That's about it.
Well, so once we talk to our customers, again, good news or bad news, is better to be well informed. We just talked about talking to your vendors, making sure that you understand where they are and who you can push and who you can't, and maintain those relationships. From your banking partners, every banker I've talked to understands the situation. They're prepared to help. Asking for 90-day relief on some debt payments, or moving some things around, maybe relief on some covenants. I have found that the bankers that we talk to are very receptive to that. So I would encourage you to pick up the phone and make that call. And then we talked about insurance earlier. Mm-hmm. So insurance, both in terms of getting a reduction because of reduction in activity, as well as potentially delaying some of those payments.
I think, just going back to the vendor real quick, when you're having that discussion with the vendor, part of that conversation is also making sure that their supply chain is in order. We had some situation where they might need to change the supply chain. One or two, actually two of our customers I know have actually changed to a supplier back in early March, trying to bring it domestic. So if you do have imports that you're looking at, you want to make sure you're on top of that piece of it, mm-hmm. So you don't interrupt your overall supply chain. And to the banks, we talked about this forecasting. One of the things a bank would like to put them a little bit at ease is let them know that you are forecasting. Mm-hmm. Even if it's sort of like a typical weatherman's forecast, a banker will feel better that, hey, you're looking at these things.
Especially if you talk about having multiple forecasts and multiple scenarios.
Yes.
If you're able to say, hey, I think this is my most likely, this is my downside scenario, mm-hmm. I think that they're very receptive to that. And so, Tommy, once we've forecasted all this, we've looked at our timing differences in our cash, what in the world do we do if we're a small business that was doing okay pre-COVID? Now we're doing this forecasting, a worst case scenario, and it looks like we're going to be $500,000 short by the end of the year on cash if this downside scenario it happens. I mean, do I shut the doors? What do I do? What do I do to close that gap?
So right now, obviously, we have the governmental relief programs that they have out there. When, as you and I've talked, there's two governmental relief programs. There's a stimulus program. The thing is to make sure that you've explored those opportunities or signed up, made sure you meet appropriate credentials or requirements for both of those programs. The other thing is I'd be talking to my bank, of course, and laying out my game plan, knowing that when I'm looking at a worst case scenario, did I make all the adjustments that I needed to? The other thing is, don't give up. There's other opportunities to look outside of that revenue channel because you want to bring in cash. And I think one of the more important pieces is look at from your state standpoint, where you operate. Talk to your chambers, okay? Talk to your state and look at what programs that might be out there to help that small business, get through the situation. There are several programs in North Carolina. I guarantee the chambers want you to be in business. Mm-hmm. So, contact your local chamber of commerce for sure.
Yeah, that's good. So now, again, for me, it starts to jazz me up. It's hard to get to that point. Now I know what I need to do to protect against the worst case scenario. So I am talking to my bank. I'm talking to them about extending additional lines of credit, backing me up. Again, generally, banks are receptive if you say, I think I might have a cash issue. Mm-hmm. 6 months from now. If you call them and say, I'm not going to make payroll tomorrow, it's a much harder thing for them to help you. But let's talk a little bit about those government programs. I think everybody's probably familiar. They've been all over the news. But the PPP program is something that it still does have funds in the second round. Last I heard, I think it's an excellent program to help small businesses retain their employees and pay expenses during these times of reduced revenue. That is a program that will allow you to borrow up to 2.5 times your monthly payroll, and then as long as you spend that money the way that they've asked that you spend it, generally on payroll, rent, utilities, and mortgage interest, then that money will then be forgiven. So basically, it's a grant from the government on the backside if you adhere to all that. Additionally to that, there's the EIDL that's administered directly from the SBA, and that is for economic impact from COVID, and it's really to help shore up working capital. Not necessarily the same as the payroll, but this is your AP and some of the other bills, some of the other costs of doing business that weren't covered by the PPP.
Yeah.
So if you're able to get out there and get in line for both of those programs, we'd really encourage you to do that. Neither one of them have any fees to get into, and both of those programs you can pay anytime without any prepayment penalties. So again, when we talk about overreacting, these are the areas. If we're looking at worst case scenario, we go out and get these, and if we end up with something better than that, we can pay it off, no harm, no foul. Right?
Exactly. I think, again, comes back to planning. Be prepared. If you're filing after you're already in trouble, then you're behind the 8 ball. Get in front of this. Go ahead, and if you haven't already submitted an application, I would put it in. Both programs, one has a shorter payback period than the PPP has a shorter payback program than the EIDL. The interest rates are extremely favorable. They're there to help the small business get through a very difficult time. They aren't there to expand your business. They're not there to take care of fixed assets and capital expenditures. They are there to pay the costs that you are having a difficult time with because of the lack of volume.
And so outside of those programs, there are also local and state programs. I know our state legislature approved a bill. It was $1.2 billion or $1.5 billion, I think it was, and that included some funding for the Golden Leaf Foundation. $50,000 loans is what I'm hearing. Again, with favorable terms to help businesses through this time. There are a lot of programs like that. We've got resources that I believe we're going to share with you guys that will help you see where all those resources are and tap into them. So I'm here to say that there are 100 other things that we could get into as far as how we close that gap. But the resources are out there as long as you're acting early enough and you're you're aggressive of enough. We just encourage everybody to take action, to not stick your head in the sand. All of these, we've got a one-pager that kind of goes down through each one of these considerations for forecast that we're going to make available. And Josh will tell you how to get a hold of that, as well as that link. And then we've also got a cash forecasting tool that's pretty simple that I think most folks could get into and use pretty easily that will be available to you if you'd like for us to share with you as well.
Absolutely. We want to remind everybody when you're watching, if you got questions up here, feel free to post them in the chat. We'll try to get to those here in the last few minutes as we work to wrap this up. And then also in the comment section down the video below, you can always go back in. We monitor that all the time. And of course, we'd be happy to reach out to you. And you can email us at connect@amplifygrowth.com. All this information is going to be in the description of the video below, how to get in touch with SCORE and everything as well. So let's sum everything up here because, again, we had some great slides and stuff to show, but this is a live event. That's what happens sometimes. Things don't work the way you intend for them to do. So we appreciate everybody sticking with us here. But creating that forecast, right? Looking at what we think is going to be, but not just creating one scenario, looking at multiple different scenarios, what we think may happen, and then step it down every time so that we can make sure that we've got a plan in place. So no matter what comes our way, we don't have to think about it. We've already done that planning. We know what actions we need to take in order to save our business and continuing to grow. Once we get all those forecasting and those plans in place, we want to make sure that our communication with our employees, with our vendors, with our banks, with all the other stakeholders in our business, make sure that everybody's there. Bring them into your team, right? Let's all go after this together. Let's all be soldiers together and work on this. When you have those conversations, and to Brent's point a minute ago, if you're proactive about those conversations, the results are much more positive than if you wait to the last minute to have those. So make sure that we're talking to vendors, working things out, everybody's on this. We're all dealing with this, right? We're all trying to get through until things start to pick back up and improve. But once we've done all those things and we know where we're going, we can find where the holes are, we can see them, and then we go out and we try to collect whatever we can in order to fill those holes, close that gap. We look at different programs that are out there, government relief programs, talk to your bank, look at the individual state programs. You see a lot of stuff in the news. There's a lot of stuff that's out there that is not in the news, right? And so, you got to put the effort in, you got to dig at that and see what you can find. But there's tons of resources out there to help businesses as we go through this time. Any final thoughts? Anything anybody wants to add to the conversation here before we wrap this up a little bit? No?
I would ask Tommy and Brent, when businesses are forecasting, and I realize it might be different for a service organization or manufacturing or a restaurant, there's going to be different terms, but what would you recommend that they start with from a forecasting standpoint? Is that 30 days out? Is it 60? Is it 90? What would you think the starting point would be?
That's a great question. I think, Tommy, I'll let you chime in, but you got to try to find that sweet spot of going far enough out that's meaningful, but not going so far out that you really you're getting less and less accurate. And so I'm going to say that you ought to be looking towards the end of the calendar year right now, Tommy. So if we're forecasting through December, does that feel right to you?
Yeah, I definitely. I think you got to look out that far, particularly if you have supplies coming in. A service organization that's purely service that doesn't really buy anything, that might be a little bit different, but still going far out because your skill set then might be labor, which could be more difficult to find. And I think the other key component is know your window for measuring where you're at, because you don't want to get to the end of the time frame and say, oh, you need to have frequent measurements to monitoring the temperature, because the temperature is changing constantly. Every day we're finding out something new. Some days it sounds scary, but just everybody needs to be calm and realize every day is going to change a little bit, but at the end we're gonna hit 330. We're going to be Derek Jeter.
That's Tommy makes a good point, and it was a great question. But if you do this one time, you spend the effort on it, you put it on the shelf, it's less effective than if you'll maintain it on a rolling basis. Let's say you update it every month and revisit your assumptions and really keep it updated.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, thank you so much for the information. Brent, Tommy, great job. Matt, thank you so much for participating with us and for our partnership with SCORE. We're excited about that and to continue to work with you guys over there. Again, check out all the websites that are in the description down below. We're going to have the downloadable content that'll be up there as well. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can have access to all of that stuff. Wait, looks like we do got one last question coming in here. Would you touch on documentation requirements for people who loan forgiveness? So that's one thing that we didn't really talk about, and it's one thing that's very big in the news right now is on, the payroll protection program that came out. There's a lot of speculation around the forgiveness piece and what's going on. Lots of people are starting to put opinions out there and chime in some stuff. So talk about what we do know, what has actually come out from the SBA, not from the talking heads on, and what do we know about the loan forgiveness piece of the payroll protection program?
So I think Tommy and I are aligned in that we can't say for sure, which puts us in a difficult place. We really feel like there's a lot of fear mongering out there. We feel like there's a lot of small businesses that have taken these loans. They needed these loans, and now they're scared to death that they're going to jail for taking the loans.
I don't get it.
Yeah, it's very frustrating, and we understand that the government has caused a lot of that, but there's a lot of a lot of other folks out there that are scaring folks, I think, unnecessarily. What my expectation is, we're expecting some additional guidance over the next few weeks on this, but my expectation is that we need the same type of documentation, Tommy, that we use to apply for the loan.
Right.
Is that fair enough? I mean, we need payroll registers. We're going to need, any type of tax documents. So 941s.
941s are going to be there.
We'll look at that. Obviously, our time frames are not going to line up the same way they did for the applying, because we're looking at a rolling 8-week period. But we're going to look at healthcare bills and utility bills. We're probably going to want to have our leases and agreements to be able to prove that they were in place before February 15th. I think that these are all going to be things that are going to be readily available to most business owners.
Right.
I don't think the burden of documentation and proof and accounting is going to be overwhelming.
No.
I think, use the loan the way it was meant to be used. Keep your documentation. If you've got a system like QuickBooks, I would encourage you to set up a class where you
Exactly.
record all these expenses in a certain class so you can easily run reports. I really want to put people's mind at ease as much as we can, that if you do the right thing, if you'll document the way that you have up to this point, I think you're going to be in pretty good shape.
Right. And I would keep track of your 401k contributions
Absolutely.
as an employer. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 75% of the loan needs to be used towards payroll costs.
Right. That's the way the Treasury has defined it. Yeah, the actual bill never made any distinction,
Okay.
but the Treasury has defined it as 75% needs to go towards payroll costs, and that's a very important number. I know in the template we are using with our clients, we test that out, and it makes sense that it'd be 75% because the loan amount's 2.5 times, right?
Okay.
And so, and what we're seeing is a lot of our clients come in at 70, 76, right around that spot.
Okay.
And the thing, to your point, if you're using this for what the intent was, which was to keep people out of unemployment lines, we're going to be okay. The government did a great thing. They've had a little bit of a problem with it. We've had people with misinterpretations. But when you do something this fast, this quick, that this company's never really had to do, okay, step back and say, hey, we actually did okay. It could have gone better, but it could have gone a lot worse.
And that's a good point. Something that people lose a lot of perspective on is that, 4 weeks ago, none of this stuff existed, right? And so we are, very rapidly trying to create a very complex program that's around there. And everybody is doing it with good intentions to put that stuff out there. So when you step back and you look at it from that perspective, we've done a pretty phenomenal thing as a country, as an economy, as business owners, and the banking system all coming together to try and pull this off. So to your point, though, if everybody's going at it with the right intentions, we firmly believe that everything's going to be okay and it's going to work out just fine for everybody.
But the final answer is stay tuned.
Yes.
Right? I mean,
We don't know.
We don't know details yet.
we're gonna get continued clarity over the coming weeks as to exactly what that documentation should look like.
Excellent. Well, guys, thank you again for your time today. Appreciate it. Again, check out the description below for all the links and all the resources that we can get with that. We appreciate you joining us today. I hope everybody stays safe out there. And as always, be kind to one another. We'll work together and get through this. Thank you, everybody.
Cheers.